Here is exactly how the Series 7 exam works and how to pass it in about 5 minutes. This is the license that lets you sell almost the entire securities menu, and it is one of the longest qualification exams FINRA gives. The Series 7 is written and administered by FINRA, the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority. Passing it registers you as a general securities representative, and that is the broadest representative license there is, covering essentially the full securities menu. It is delivered on a computer, and every single item is multiple choice with 4 answer choices. No simulations, no essays, no oral component. The format is 125 scored questions in 3 hours and 45 minutes. That is a little under 2 minutes per question, which sounds generous and is not, because a large share of Series 7 items are computations or multi-step scenarios rather than straight recall. You are reading a paragraph, extracting the numbers that matter, and then doing arithmetic. But your exam actually contains 130 items. FINRA seeds 5 extra unidentified pretest questions, scattered at random, that do not count toward your score. And here is the detail worth having. It was 10 pretest items, for a total of 135, until FINRA changed it in the 2025 content outline. Plenty of study material still says 135, so check the date on whatever you are using. There is also no penalty for guessing, so never leave an item blank. The passing score is 72. Read that as a score, not as a percentage of the questions you got right. FINRA equates every candidate's exam, a statistical adjustment that puts everyone on a common scale so that drawing a slightly harder set of questions is not a harder exam to pass. The practical consequence is that the raw number of correct answers behind a 72 can shift a little between versions, so counting to 90 and calling yourself safe is not a plan. Aim well above the line. Now the requirement that stops people before they ever book a seat. You cannot walk in off the street and sit the Series 7. FINRA requires you to be associated with and sponsored by a member firm, which in practice means you are hired first and the firm files a Form U-4 for you. The Series 7 also has a co-requisite, the SIE, the Securities Industry Essentials exam, and you need both to be registered. Either order works, and the SIE needs no firm, is open at 18, and stays valid for 4 years. That is why most people sit it early while they are still job hunting. FINRA splits the exam into 4 job functions, and the split is the most lopsided you will see on any major exam. 3 of those 4 functions together are barely a quarter of your score. Function 3, providing customers with information and making recommendations, is 73% of the exam. 91 of your 125 scored questions come from that single function. If you study nothing else properly, study this. So it is worth knowing what sits inside it, and the shape of that tells you what the exam really is. Products and their risks, the recommendation itself, and the paperwork that follows the trade. Notice what that means in practice. The Series 7 is not really a test about markets. It is a test about matching a product to a customer and being able to defend the choice. Let us do 3 real questions from the bank so you can feel the level. First, options. An investor with no position in the underlying stock writes one XYZ55 put and receives the premium. Which statement describes the writer's position? The answer is that the writer is obligated to buy 100 shares at $55 per share if assigned. The rule underneath never changes. The buyer pays the premium and gets the right. The writer receives the premium and takes the obligation. A put is a right to sell, so whoever sold it has to be the one who buys. Second, rules. Which statement about the care obligation of regulation best interest is correct? It requires you to understand the recommendation's risks and costs and to consider reasonably available alternatives, and it cannot be satisfied by disclosure alone. That last clause is the whole point. Regulation best interests 4 obligations stack, so telling a customer about a conflict never buys you out of acting in their best interest. Third, margin, where the arithmetic lives. A customer buys 1,000 shares of a stock at $50 per share, and Regulation T requires 50% upfront. The purchase is $50,000, so the customer deposits $25,000 and the firm lends the other $25,000, leaving a debit balance of $25,000. Notice the shape of it. Every number you need is handed to you, and the work is knowing which rule to apply. So how do you actually pass it? First, drill practice questions until the rules are automatic and drill to well above 72, not to it. Second, master the vocabulary because this exam turns on single words. Rights versus obligations, general obligation versus revenue, open-end versus closed-end. Miss the word and you miss the question no matter how well you understand the concept. Third, keep a written log of what you get wrong and weight your study time toward function 3, since that is where nearly 3/4 of the points are. And fourth, manage the clock. You already saw that the computations hand you every number, so the risk is not difficulty, it is time. Flag anything costing more than about 2 minutes instead of sitting on it. Quick recap. 125 scored questions plus 5 unscored, 3 hours and 45 minutes, and a passing score of 72 that is equated rather than a raw percentage. You need a sponsoring firm and the SIE. And 73% of the exam is one function: products, recommendations, and the records behind them. Practice all of it free on real questions at .com/en/series-7. Products and risks, options, regulations and ethics, customer accounts and suitability, and trading and margin in English, Chinese, and Spanish with no sign-up.